Hey there, you just heard from me, but here I am again enjoying this second day of Revenue Excellence Summit. RevEx Fest is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros, and you heard me before, but for those of you joining us now, and if you're not familiar with Modern Sales Pros, we are the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, and sales and revenue operations, sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer the toughest revenue questions out there. Um, if you're still not a member of MSP, you will be invited to join right after the summit. We would love to have you here. Now on to our amazing sponsors. This summit wouldn't be possible without our amazing sponsors who you see in this slide. Big thanks to them for making RevEx Fest happen. To learn more about these innovative companies, click on the Sponsors Booth tab at the top of this event page. Now, moving on to our jam-packed agenda. While you're checking the sponsors in the tab on the top of the page, you can also see the full schedule for the 3-day event that is RevEx Fest. Let's talk about this panel and how to get the most out of it. So the agenda for this panel is I'm going to do some housekeeping notes. The speakers will introduce themselves, then they will start doing the discussing the topic. For today, we have a masterclass with Kazanjy, and I think he has a surprise for you. And then there's a space for some live Q&A, so make sure to send your questions in the chat and using the Q&A function. And finally, they will share some key takeaways with us. That's enough for now. I'm gonna pass it to P. Kazanjy so he can start this amazing masterclass. And he has a surprise guest for you. So please make sure to stick around and participate in this masterclass. Pete, you can take it from here.
So I'm Pete Kazanjy. I'm one of the founders and CRO of Atrium. So Atrium makes data-driven sales management software. It's software that helps sales managers, sales leaders, and reps use metrics to improve performance. And one of the things that's like super fantastic about Atrium is that it only takes a couple minutes to set up a free account. You just sign in with your read-only access to your Salesforce CRM, and presto changeo, you within a few minutes have a world-class world-class analytics harness, and that'll show you how all of your reps are performing across hundreds of metrics. So that's a little bit on Atrium there. Wanted to introduce so what we're going to be talking about today is kind of a fun, spicy topic, which is rep performance management. And specific, like, this is an important component of data-driven sales management. It's not the whole thing, but it's a really important component of it. And essentially what that means is taking, finding areas where reps are having challenges, where reps are underperforming, and either glowing them up, getting them to success, or calling it a day and saying, hey, this person's not going to be a fit here. We really need to move things along and move this person out. And we're going to be talking about how you can do that. We're going to be talking about how you can do that in a way that's fair, data-driven, and ideally, solves these problems. But in the situation where it doesn't, you can be effective in moving out the folks who are not going to be successful in your organization. So a little bit on me, and then also Bridget. I'm Pete Kazanjy. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. We make, as I noted earlier, data-driven sales management software. Prior to Atrium, I started a recruiting software company called TalentBin in around 2010. I was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And so during that time, I really went from being a business generalist founder with a product marketing and a product management background to our first sales rep, our first sales manager, our first sales leader. And then when we were acquired by Monster Worldwide, I was responsible for new product sales for a 600-person sales organization at Monster. So a little bit of a different kind of experience in both of those situations. Subsequent to that, wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales. Pictured right there. and then also started our Modern Sales Pros community. And so enough about me. We happen to be joined today by Atrium's illustrious Director of Customer Success, Bridget Seacard. Bridget, you want to share a little bit about like what you spend your time on right now at here at Atrium and kind of like what you did before?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Pete. Hi, everybody. My name is Bridget. It's great to be on with you live today. And to share a little bit about what I was doing before Atrium was actually sales operations. So I
Weird.
was, yeah. So I joined Atrium in February 2020. What a time to be alive, right after a few years in sales ops. And I joined Atrium to work in CS because I was like, wow, this product would be really, really great for somebody like me in sales ops. And that has proven to be true over the past almost 3 years now. So now I'm running the customer success team. Our big focuses are, of course, performance management for our reps and also helping our customers with performance management, which starts, of course, with understanding all the metrics and all the performance behaviors that need to be scaled or corrected or what have you, or coached, I should say. But some other stuff that's going on with us is we're multi-threading, we're doing QBRs, we're closing renewals, and we're setting up new customers and implementations. So if you're an Atrium customer, hello, thanks for partnering with us. And if you're not, hopefully one day you will be.
And if you and if you're not, one of the most compelling reasons to be an Atrium customer is getting to work with our customer success team, because like let's be honest, they slap. They're fantastic. um, awesome. Well, I'm really excited because Bridget and her team work with the nearly 300 customers that we have today, and she is just an absolute wealth of knowledge with respect to data-driven sales management. Before we get started here, there's a couple of things, kind of offers that we have on tap here for attendees. One of the things that we found when working with our customers is Atrium exists to help managers and leaders and also reps use metrics and data to improve their performance. One of the things that we found is that there's a pretty big deficit when it comes to enabling managers just to manage, right? And kind of teaching managers. So oftentimes managers are AE promotions, SDR promotions, and unfortunately, like most of the enablement resources go straight to the reps, and there's kind of a deficit in helping managers like be better managers. And so one of the things that we do is we actually partner with a fine gentleman named Richard Harris to do monthly sales management boot camps. They're a virtual. It's a half-day boot camp. It's done virtually. It's all on Atrium. It's paid for by Atrium. If this is something that you're potentially interested in doing, we're going to go ahead and drop a link here. It's typically something like this would typically cost like $1,000. In this case, it's on us. All we ask in exchange is for folks to take a quick disco conversation with our a lovely AE from our Atrium sales team. So that's the first thing. And then the second offer that we have on deck here today is a set of resources for folks to be better managers. So like this is training, and then these are assets. One of my favorite books on the topic is Five Secrets of the Sales Coach, and then also, which is a very fun read. It's a very quick read. It's written as a narrative, and then of course Michelle Vazana's Crushing Quota. And this wouldn't be complete without a nice Atrium Coffees for Coaches Yeti, because that's really what we're talking about, is being amazing performance coaches here, because that's the business that we're in, and using metrics that do that better. So if folks are interested in getting a couple of copies of this book, and also one of these lovely Coffees for Coaches Yetis, again, we're going to go ahead and drop that link in the chat here, and you're welcome to sign up for that. Again, all we ask is in exchange for that is a quick disco conversation with one of our account executives. So that's going to be that. So let's talk about performance management. And so one of the big things that I want to just like put on the table here is that managing rep performance issues, whether it's SDRs or AEs or fill in the blank, it's not something that people necessarily relish, and it's not necessarily something that people are like you're used to or good at, and it's uncomfortable, but it's extremely important, and we're going to talk about why it's so important and the opportunity costs associated with that. Most of the time, this is kind of the thing that we see, right? um, Generally speaking, your job as a manager is to make your reps more performant, and that means tackling performance problems. But for whatever reason, things just constantly like keep coming back in the you know get in the way of that. And so what we're going to talk about today is why this is so important and why you should be doing this, and then talk about a couple methodologies by which to make it a lot better. So these are some of the reasons why you want to be you want to be mindful of these things. So first and foremost, um, what you want to be wary of is AEs that don't cover their own costs, and this could be also SDRs as well. And so an important thing to kind of like think about here is what's known as, oftentimes people hear the term unit economics, right? And so at the end of the day, an AEs and other revenue AEs, SDRs, and other revenue professionals, they're here to bring in revenue. In the case of SDRs, they're here to generate pipeline. In the case of AEs, they're here to bring in bookings. But imagine you have a situation where an account executive, maybe costs you 150K OTE a year. That's 13K a month. And so if they're bringing in less cash than that, than 13K a month, they're literally burning cash, right? And so moreover, the thing is that they're not only are they not supposed to be burning cash, they're actually supposed to be delivering what's known as contribution margin on top of that. So say, a typical mid-market account executive quota might be anywhere between 40 or 50 or 60K of bookings a month, in order to not only offset this right here, but then add additional contribution margin to the business to pay for engineering expense, or pay for real estate, or fill in the blank. And so if this isn't happening right here, that's a real substantial problem, right? Because then your organization is upside down. And another thing that's important there is, like, maybe actually you probably shouldn't be hiring more account executives, because it feels that if you don't have a situation where AEs are covering their own nut, and then moreover bringing in bringing in additional revenue on top of that, well, seems like there might be a problem with your go-to-market, or there might be a problem where the product isn't fitting the market, or what have you, because like this is the market kind of telling you something there. The second thing to kind of think about, and like this is a pretty extreme example because ideally you wouldn't be having this situation. I think Bridget, I think this ends up being a lot more common than what we would that you would think to anticipate. Like, we work with a lot of customers, and when we look at their bookings data with them to kind of help them understand from a goal standpoint, sometimes you do see this, especially in a ramp scenario. What do you say, or like what kind of keeps people from addressing this sort of issue, would you say, given the fact that it like could be pretty obvious on its face, like that someone's not getting it done from a booking standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons that people, managers, I should say, avoid addressing this problem head on with their reps. And I think, it has a lot to do with like the context of the manager, where they're at in their career. I mean, I know I've been managing for over a year now, but it definitely took a lot of time
Yeah.
to experience
Yep.
and trying it over and over again, and maybe not doing so well at first. But yeah, I think a lot of managers that we work with across our customers, they could be 5, 10, 15 years in, they could be 2 days in. But it never really gets less uncomfortable, but it does get easier with experience, because I think, managers don't want to demotivate their reps. They want to do the opposite. So it's kind of just about finding the thing finding the linchpin that might motivate that rep to, perform at their best and kind of pick up their game, throw down, rather than just, demotivate them to give up.
Yeah.
But there's a fine line to walk there for sure.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite Bridget Seacardisms is, what were we talking about the other day? There's being experienced, right? I want to get more experience before I do XYZ.
Oh,
some action, and then there's like, yeah, you have to do that
I think
that
there's
experience.
it's people saying I want to be more comfortable doing X, right?
Right,
Like,
CJ.
and it's about actually you want to be more experienced doing X, and in order to be more experienced, you need to have experiences with X.
Do it.
So
Do that. Do the action, which we'll talk about a little bit more here in a second around like what the actions are that we would, that people should be doing here. So the second problem that people have to really be mindful of, like this is a pretty extreme example. The other kind of like less subtle, or sorry, more subtle, like less obvious um, situation is when lower performers who are underperforming are stealing other people's at bats. And the reason, like, so this is an example right here. This is a screenshot of an Atrium KPI card from some organization, anonymized customer organization, and you can actually see some pretty substantial variability in the win rates of these different account executives right here. And so the thing that is the reality is that you've got a set amount of like lead generation capacity, right? There's a certain number of like Google searches that are happening. There's a certain amount of like inbound leads that marketing is able to generate. There's a certain amount of opportunities that SDRs are able to generate, what have you. And so if you don't have, right, if those opportunities are going to people who can't convert them, who have lower win rates, well, that's something to be mindful of, because those opportunities being fed to a higher performing rep or a higher performing set of reps would then convert at a much higher clip. And it's not just a problem, right? It's like not just a bummer for these individuals right here who maybe only convert their ops at a 5% clip or a 10% clip, a 10% win rate, like only closing 1 out of 10 ops or 1 out of 20 ops. It's also a bummer for the business, right? It's a bummer for these other reps right here, because until people are fully saturated from a time and day capacity, right? Like they literally have no more space on their calendar. In general, account executives would like to have more customer meetings, would like to have more first meetings. And so by not managing up or managing out folks who are low conversion, you're not just not doing them a favor, you're also not doing these folks a favor right here, and you're also kind of robbing that opportunity cost from the business. Bridget, when you guys work with organizations, are people oftentimes surprised by the variability in win rates between their reps?
yes. Yes, they are.
It ends up being like more shocking than you would anticipate.
Yes, not only that, but also not just their reps compared to each other over, this quarter, but also one rep's win rate this quarter versus last quarter. There can be some inconsistencies over time, which also is a concerning thing to look back on, right? So, yeah, but there's generally, with this visibility, surprises, and it can definitely be jarring at first, but it's the first step to like coaching to the problems that are actually happening.
Yeah, and the good news is I actually do. We see this a lot, because as I noted earlier, like it takes 5 minutes to set up an Atrium account, and one of the really kind of neat things about our sales motion that our account executives really love is that they sell on other people, like on our prospects data, which is like really fun, right? Like it's like kind of a it's like a Sherlock Holmes investigation where you like jump in there trying to figure out like, okay, like what are your biggest problems right now? Well, I'm concerned about Bobby. All right, well, like you should be concerned about Bobby because his win rate is really low. So you were right to be concerned. I bet did you know that it was his win rate? No, I didn't. I just knew that he wasn't like performing from an output standpoint. Okay, great. Now let's figure out what's driving that low win rate. Oh, look at this. He's like wildly overloaded. He has way too many ops and his untouched op counts are bananas. Great. That's very fixable. Let's fix that. right? Or alternatively, his conversion rate at a proposal is really, really bad as compared to other people. Seems like he's progressing things down the pipe that actually aren't ready to get down there. And so those are the first, I don't know, the joke, like the first step on the road to recovery is like admitting that you have a problem. That's kind of the situation here, right? Is like admitting that you've got a problem, but like once we know that we have a problem and kind of the genre of the problem in question, well, guess what? We can tackle that, right? Like we put a name on it, we know that we're able to tackle it, and we can go on our merry way. And if we're like once we're tackling it, right, versus avoiding it, once we're tackling it, we know that we can manage in the right direction. And if it doesn't recover, that's okay. Like we've put in the effort rather than being an ostrich with our head in the sand. The other thing to kind of note here is, and this is something that that I think a lot of people don't appreciate, is especially like maybe you're thinking about like if you're a sales operations person or maybe you're a very data driven leader. One of the things that we talk a lot about here at Atrium, because we do data driven sales management, which is different than like analytics. The things that like are being measured and managed and improved here are people, right? And people are emotional and they react to other people, and they there's like as my brother used to say when he was a little kid, people are squishy. People are messy, and it's true. And so another thing that you have to be mindful about is that like underperformance, it's not just isolated to an individual, right? It can be contagious, right? Like, I mean, we're all fans of memes, right? Like that self-propagate in the world. Well, like underperformance, and also by conversely, overperformance can also be, is also contagious, because there's all sorts of if you have an individual on your team who's underperforming, and you're gonna like not bringing their best game, you like it's going to invite other folks within the organization to kind of think about like, hey, why am I putting my why am I putting my nose to the grindstone? Why am I throwing down in a meaningful way if this other person isn't? And in sales, you might say, well, everybody's compensated individually, and like there's commission and there's this variable compensation. You'd be shocked. Like even in the situation like that, like if you have an environment of underperformance, like literally what you have to do is your outperformers literally have to be like stick their fingers in their ears and be like la 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 la, I'm not listening to that. And then moreover, the challenge that you might have, I love that that we have this like Frozen theme going on here, because my 5-year-old is just like absolutely obsessed with Frozen. Like you're also going to chase your high performers out of the organization, because like nobody wants to be on a team with a bunch of scrubs, right? And so this is a really underappreciated situation where not like the toleration of underperformance not only can invite the deterioration of performance from other folks, it also will help your higher performers out the door there. Bridget, is this something that you guys frequently see in in the customer base?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we every day are speaking with customers who are encountering something like this, because on most sales teams, AEs, SDRs, CSMs, there's going to be folks who are not giving as much effort, and Atrium helps you actually see that. So, for example, one manager I've worked with was kind of living in fear of addressing an issue, much like Anna, right? Where he was like, I don't want to be seen as a micromanager on my team. But at the same time, he was already getting comments from other people on the team, kind of like, hey,
Yep.
I feel demotivated, right?
Yep.
And so it was like very, it was jarring, because it was like, wow, I'm not the only person that notices this. And that's the price of visibility, right? Is like everybody can see this. And so it holds the manager more accountable to address it. And so when manager gave that feedback in a one-on-one, just said, hey, we got to get emails up, that person didn't listen. put them on a PIP, gave them a weekly email goal that they set in Atrium. Person did it, but was sandbagging it for later in the week. And that's when the manager had to get a little bit micro and to make it a daily goal, right?
Yep.
And that's where the rep failed. So that person ended up being managed out. But the rest of the team was able to see that, hey, the manager addressed it, which kind of restored faith in the manager and also reinforced that we got to behave like Elsa, not Anna, right? To keep your activity levels up. Otherwise, just because somebody else is underperforming, the precedent is that it will get addressed and that person will be managed up or out.
I love that story. I feel bad for Anna here. I feel that this should be Olaf. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come back through here and make this Olaf because like it's okay to make fun of Olaf. I think my son would have a meltdown if he knew that we were if Anna was underperforming here.
Anna would never do that.
Anna would never do that, right? Anna would never do that. Come on, she's always like running around trying to save Elsa. That's a fantastic story. Thank you very much for that, Bridget. I mean, I think that's a really good point because one of the things that like I mean, I'll kind of cop to this myself, as a manager and as a leader. By the time you're seeking to address it yourself, I guarantee you that your reps are already thinking about it and talking about it, right? They're talking about it on the group chat, right? They're like, hey, what's going on with exactly what Bridget said. Hey, what's going on with Bob, right? Or like, what's going on with Anna? And like, geez Louise, why is this not being why is Pete not handling this? Does he not care about us? Does he, like those things are going through everybody else's head, and which is why it's as a manager and as a leader, it's so important to address that because we definitely don't want Elsa going out the door, right? Which actually I think is a lyric from Frozen. Cool. So the fourth thing that you really have to be mindful of, I think there is a lyric about going out the door.
Love is an open door is the
There
song.
you go.
Yes.
Oh yeah. There you go.
But
Yeah.
anywho.
Yes, performance management is an open door. So number 4 here, that you really have to be mindful about is like as you're hiring, this is kind of a variant of this one right here. As you're hiring new folks, you want to bring those folks into an environment of performance and success because they're showing up and like they're not 100% sure exactly like what the deal is in this organization. And so if they come into an organization and see, a tolerance for underperformance and they see like there isn't a performance management culture, then, like it's going to take all the more personal motivation and effort in order to hit the cover off the ball there. And this is something that we see quite a bit. A really kind of key use case for Atrium is what we call ramping instrumentation. I actually do a master class on what we call data-driven ramp management, and paying attention to those leading indicators in ramp ends up being a really, really important thing. But the way that you ensure that people are highly motivated, they're hitting the ground running, is that they see that there's a high performance and kind of quick ramp of reps who came before them. And they like jump on that train. It's like, they jump on the water slide and they're like zoom off to the races there. And if you don't have that going on, it's going to be even tougher to do that. The last thing that I'm going to kind of touch on here that's a little bit like geekier, this is something that like your CFO, your CEO, founder, your board will care about here, is what we like to call broken numbers. And so if you think about the performance of your organization, the performance of your organization and like, ARR growth, how much bookings is being added, et cetera, all of that then that is a summation of the performance of the individuals on your team. And so if you don't have, like, to kind of use this example up here, if you have underperformance on the part of a slice of your team, what that's going to do is that's going to dilute the the organizational performance, right? Like the metaphor I like to use there is kind of like pouring cold water in a hot bath situation. And so how that, like, that's not just a problem from an individual standpoint, but it's also a problem from a aggregate standpoint, where if you have underperformance on these individuals, you're going to see things like higher cost of sales, right? So because individual reps will be driving less bookings on a like these individual reps right here will be driving less bookings on a per rep basis, which, you know, as related to their salary expense, their base salary expense, they won't be driving as much bookings as compared to like the cost of marketing to generate those leads. All of that then leads to a higher cost of sales, a more capital intensive business, right? So the business doesn't throw off money as quickly as other businesses, and so that's going to make it less attractive to investors, which then will lead to a lower valuation, or, you know, challenges in actually executing on fundraising. And so to kind of give examples of what this might look like in practice here, this is actually a slide from another presentation that I do on ramping of sales or scaling of sales organizations, excuse me. And so the difference between very crisply ramping cohorts of reps, where you have, you know, you hire 4 new reps, you get them to success within a certain amount of time, and then you go and hire another cohort of reps, as compared to a longer ramp period here. You can see after 36 months, with the faster ramping cohorts, you get to $1.6 million in monthly contribution margin. Whereas if you have fewer cohorts, because they take 8 months to ramp before you add a new cohort, well, now you're only at 800K per month of contribution margin. And so doing really good performance management, getting people, and this is where, you know, ramping is really important. Data driven ramp management ends up being really important. But if you aren't managing that proactively, you're going to end up more on this trajectory here than you are on this trajectory, with the kind of the fundraising and the business valuation implications associated therewith. I actually kind of jumped past this, Bridget, on the ramping side of things.
Mhm.
Obviously this is a really critical thing that, you know, for our customers. I think they're very focused on making sure that their AEs are ramping in band, their SDRs are ramping into band. What do you kind of see as like the biggest challenges for folks in, like, A, being mindful of how people are ramping or not, and then B, addressing situations where folks are ramping poorly?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so I think that lack of awareness around a rep's ramp on a manager's part is an issue, but I also think, and I think it's an issue for the rep themselves, because when you
Sure.
start, when a rep starts at working, you know, on a revenue team at a startup or tech company, that's when they're most malleable. That's generally when they're
Sure.
most stoked on feedback, when they want to know if they're doing things right, you know, and
Mhm.
especially when you get those high performers, like they aren't high performers yet. They're just super anxious and like really want to make sure that they're doing a good thing or the right thing. Because for revenue generating teams, generally SDRs, AEs, CSMs, they're not creating ops for a couple of months. They're training, or they're not closing business for a few, you know, few to several months. They're training and then they're doing their best at their at bats. Or CSMs, you know, are at the mercy of their customers' renewal dates. So, point being, visibility into ramp is super helpful for the manager to know, what do I need to do to help this person get up to speed as quickly as possible. But it's also huge for the rep for expectation setting and for letting them know, hey, high performer, like you're doing a really good job. Like you're attending the right number of meetings to shadow. You are sending the right number of follow-up emails on behalf of the CSM you're shadowing, right? Like you are in band with high performers that came before you. Look at you track so well, you know, with them. And that gives them a lot of that at least on my team has been really helpful for people who are high performers and super stoked to
Yeah.
be joining Atrium.
Yep.
And then of course for those who are not, it's like, hey, you're down here. Typically people are right here in terms of their effort or efficiency metrics right now. Let's talk about what we can do to get you where you need to be. And then, that's generally also really helpful for them to have that visibility and give them kind of a North Star to shoot for. So that's been really helpful for people on my team.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because it's like oftentimes people don't get into management to kind of, be grumpy or be like to make their reps, like their reps feel bad, or um and oftentimes what ends up happening is people think that it's like that being hands-on from a performance management standpoint, or transparent about this stuff, like they're afraid it's going to hurt people's feelings, and so then they shy away from it. But a way to kind of think about it is it's like it's not fair to the staff, right? It's like not fair to the individuals themselves. Like we had this, an issue like this recently with somebody on our team who they were a career switcher who were moving into a revenue role, and it was a hypothesis. It was a hypothesis as to whether or not they were, that like a customer facing role, which of course, like what does customer facing roles involve? Talking to lots and lots and lots and lots of customers, talking to prospects, talking to customers, having lots and lots and lots of meetings, sending lots and lots and lots of emails, constantly being like doing activity, being able to like switch, context switch, et cetera, et cetera. It was a hypothesis that that person was going to be able to do that. And they weren't doing it in spite of all the like enablement and support. And so it's not fair to them, right? Because like, we only get to be on God's green earth for so long. It's not fair to someone to to look the other way and pretend that they're having success when they're not, right? And like ideally what you seek to do is you seek to coach them up and train them up. But if that's not working, it's still not fair to them to have them continuing to like twist in the wind when they could be moving into another role, maybe in the organization, maybe in another organization that's going to be a way better fit for them, that's aligns with the things that they like to do, or maybe they're like more naturally gifted at. And so what I would challenge people to do here is, rather than saying to themselves like, oh, I don't want to have a performance management conversation with this person. And actually we have these fun little cheat sheets here around how to do performance. Like this is making data-driven sales performance conversations easy. It's a nice little checklist. Rather than telling yourself a story that it's like people are not going to be like, your reps are not going to be happy about that. It's actually, like it's unfair not to have those conversations with them. Cool. And so that's the reason why all that stuff matters. And so the thing that we're going to kind of like change gears here and talk about ways of addressing this, ways of like doing this, like tools to do better performance management. And so really the big thing there is that data and metrics is the best way to identify performance issues. You can't argue with data. Helps you see around corners. It allows you to see whether or not things are getting better. All these sort of things. It removes, it removes opinions. It's objective, and so of course, the way that we think about this here at Atrium, and this is going to be a quick commercial for Atrium, is that doing data-driven sales management is the right way of doing this. It's the right way of like managing a modern sales organization in general. And so one of the reasons why we built it, Atrium, was because we believe that sales managers, AE managers, SDR managers, AM, CSM managers deserve their like dedicated software to help them be better at this, which involves every KPI you could possibly want for your SDRs, AEs, AM, CSMs, but then also the monitoring and instrumentation thereof. So, being able to track progress towards goals and achievement or not thereof, statistical analysis and on various metrics in order to help with early warning alerting, and then also root cause analysis. And so, in short, Atrium exists to help those sales managers, leaders, and reps use data to improve team performance. And we do this for hundreds and hundreds of modern sales organizations that are lucky enough to work with Bridget and her team. So cool. So how do we deal with these performance issues? So we're going to kind of talk about some mechanisms by which to address this. First, these are some kind of ways to do this. One, a big thing that we focus on here at Atrium internally, but then also we coach our customers on, is that you have to make space for this to happen. A joke we say internally is that that calendar is destiny. And so if you don't have time on your calendar for feedback and performance coaching conversations, you're gonna you're gonna be more prone to have this sort of situation going on. Like, oh, things keep intervening. Well, not if you have specific time on the calendar as a forcing function there. And of course, the great place for this is the one-on-one. The second thing that you want to do is you want to set clear expectations about levels of performance. A great way of doing this is with goals. Organizations oftentimes do this from an output standpoint, whether it's a bookings quota or it's an opportunity creation quota for SDRs, but having specific, clear expectations with respect to levels of performance is a great way of getting ahead of these sort of things. Next, you need to make sure that you're inspecting your data and metrics to detect these issues and to detect and diagnose these issues. And then the last thing is that you need to be willing to have those conversations, make a plan to remediate things, and then loop back. I'm a huge fan, on that last part around having conversations, making a plan, and then looping back again to verify that that's happened. This is something that Corey Bray and Hillman Sori talk about quite a bit in 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach. Actually, coach right here is an acronym. I forget what it stands for, but to essentially to do just that. I'll highly recommend that book. And again, maybe we can drop a link for folks to sign up for that book and the Yeti if they'd want. So then the next thing is, okay, let's talk about having time on your calendar. Yep, calendar is destiny, no lie. These are some of the ways, kind of the places in an operating rhythm where you might have opportunities for coaching and feedback. Pipeline reviews are great, but it's deal centric. And so what we like to do is we advocate that folks break apart their kind of coaching coaching opportunities for deal strategy sessions versus one-on-one meetings. And the deal strategy is to focus on top deals and do coaching there. On that, help kind of reps navigate through the issues in question. And then the one-on-one is not for deal review. The one-on-one specifically is for reviewing metrics, talking about those coaching initiatives, looping back on the issues that have been identified previously and that are being managed. QBRs are a great way of doing this on a more on a longer term cadence, I guess. It's like one-on-ones are every other week. Maybe they're weekly, maybe they're every other week, and you're working on a certain set of things that you're coaching with the rep. The QBRs are you say, hey, okay, let's take a breath. Let's look back over the last quarter. Let's see where we had success. Let's see where we had improvement areas. Let's set an intention for the thing that we're gonna fix in the coming quarter. And then that then flows into that next set of one-on-one meetings there. Bridget, when you work with customers, what are the kind of the biggest ways that you recommend folks kind of use this concept of calendar as destiny to drive better performance in their teams?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that calendar is something that we're all living in to some extent. If you're in customer facing, you're going to be in that multiple times a day. And it's super underutilized, and it's something that when you leverage it to its fullest potential, it's not only destiny, it's behavioral changes that actually come out of it. So, for example, one manager I was working with had a rep on a PIP, and there was a few tenets of the PIP that the rep needed to execute on. The manager wanted to do their diligence and say, hey, I'm here to help you. I want to, not only check in with you on your progress a couple of times a week. I'm actually going to put time on your calendar every day for the things that you need to be focusing on in order to succeed in this PIP. So not only was it calendar invites that were on that rep's calendar to block time for those things, but it was also links in the invites to the resources that rep would need in order to succeed on the PIP. So maybe that's links to sales off sequences or, Salesforce reports or whatever they need. So that I think is one little anecdote around how to leverage it in a way that actually guides the rep toward the behaviors that they should be prioritizing and focusing on.
I love that. Yeah, and that's something that Corey and Hillman talk about a bunch in Five Secrets of the Sales Coach is the like what's the actual plan, and then like what are the specific actions that are going to be taken, because it's one thing to kind of be like, hey, look, like you have a pipeline hygiene problem. I know this because your untouched ops counts are kind of heinous. Why don't you go ahead and fix that? Well, I mean, we might tell ourselves a story like, oh, okay, well, like they should figure it out on their own. Okay, but like, why would you make it hard? Right,
Right.
that's your job as a manager. Is like, hey, we're gonna make this easy for you. Here's a hyperlink to an Atrium op view. Here, it's all of your, it's all of your ops that haven't been touched in the trailing 30 days. And here's this one here that like of all of your ops that don't have a meeting on the calendar in the future. We're gonna hyperlink this in this calendar invite here. There's one on Tuesday morning from from 9 to 10, and there's one from Thursday morning from 9 to 10. And these are just going to repeat on your calendar until we get this untouched opportunities count, get this stubborn untouched opportunities count down to where it should be, right? And if you're not able to adhere to that after I kind of gave you a yellow brick road to walk along,
Right.
well, maybe this isn't for you.
Yeah. It's like, if you're afraid of micromanaging or being perceived that way, then, explaining that like Pete just did and being very explicit about why are we putting these things on your calendar? It's because we want this to be as frictionless as possible because I want you to succeed.
Frictionless. I love that as like the phrase here. Cool. So let's go ahead and talk about setting clear expectations about performance. So a really, really great way of doing this is just set goals. Just set goals. It's not hard, right? And importantly, set goals on leading indicators. It's one thing to say, hey, you know what? We should have, we should do 400K of bookings, in a quarter, or like, 200K of bookings in a quarter. Okay, cool. But like, how many customer facing meetings should AEs be having on a weekly basis in order to get to that? How many new opportunities now need to come into their pipe on a monthly basis in order to make sure that they're going to be able to get that? What should their win rate look like on a quarterly basis in order to do that? If you just set out if you don't map those out, then attaining this big hairy goal of 200K of bookings in a quarter, or 600K in bookings in a year is going to feel insurmountable. But breaking it down into these leading indicators and then goaling on it will make it such that on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, you're seeing how you're tracking to success there. And get really granular, right? Like one of the things that I joke about with AEs is that the fundamental unit of selling is the customer facing meeting. Right. So measuring that on a weekly basis for your account executives is completely reasonable. Completely reasonable, right? Do you want to have multiple weeks in a row where you like look back and be like, oh wow, so and so had three customer facing meetings last week, the week before, and the week before that? That sounds terrible, right? That's a lost month. And guess what? There's only 12 months in the quarter. So getting really kind of crisp on the setting goals on those leading indicators is a very powerful thing. Same with SDRs, right? SDRs having more goals on a weekly basis because the cadence is a little bit faster ends up being kind of more important. But again, don't be afraid about getting really granular and really proactive around AE goals. It's only going to make them more successful, and like it's going to allow them to self-manage in a better capacity, right? Like they can bird dog their own metrics. Say, hey, here I am on a Wednesday, and oh my goodness, I didn't realize that I'm behind from a meetings on the calendar standpoint or a touches on ops standpoint. I guess I should block some time. I'll block the first half of tomorrow to do pipe gen and pipe hygiene maintenance to touch all my ops, because I know that I'm tracking behind on my goals for this week. Bridget, I know that actually setting goals ends up being kind of part of the implementation process here at Atrium, or the Atrium University process here. What are the kind of the numbers of goals that you guys end up recommending folks end up starting out with?
That's a good question, Pete. I think that having goals on like your top 5 metrics is probably a good round number to start with. And you can have 2 goals on a metric, 2, 3 goals on a metric if you want. Like it could be, hey, we want you to have 20 meetings a month, and that means you should be having 5 meetings a week, right? So we have
Sure.
2 goals set on that for different time frames.
Yep,
But
totally.
I think that starting simple, starting with the metrics that you're obsessed with and really sure about, is great. And then as you become more data driven and as you understand your motion better, you will naturally want to add more goals. That's definitely what's happened to me as I've grown into my management role and understanding our CX motion more. So starting a little bit smaller with those things that you're just obsessed with and maybe need to report on up to your leadership team or to the board.
Yeah. I do a master class on what is it like setting and managing with goals that don't suck. And I think that like the idea of kind of like easing your way into the jacuzzi ends up kind of being a good a good approach there. So the third thing here that is important ends up being inspection of those key metrics, right? So you can't if you're not looking at the data, it's not something that you're going to be able where you're going to be able to catch these issues. And so what that means is either having CRM reporting and dashboarding or BI set up. Unfortunately, this requires kind of the construction of this. We like to say that data-driven sales management software ends up being something that is very helpful here because it's like ready to go out of the box and does all that monitoring for you. But however you're going to slice this, however you're going to approach this. Making sure that you're bird dogging this information ends up being really important. And so what you want to end up doing is looking for situations where somebody's underperforming as compared to their peers, or looking for situations where somebody's like trend line is deteriorating down. If you can do that statistically by having something that like monitors this for you, that can be all the more powerful there. We actually have these laminates that we like to send to folks that allow you to do the diagnosis of those issues. So like it's one thing to understand that somebody's got a bookings problem, but then going upstream to kind of figure out what is the root cause. Like is it because they don't have enough wins? Is it because their ASP is too low? Is it because their win rate is off? So kind of doing that diagnosis is the way that you're going to be able to figure out what the root cause is and then tackle that. And then the fourth thing that we want to talk about here is like making sure that you're actually driving those conversations. So couple ways of addressing this, and again we have that data driven performance management cheat sheet here, kind of desk reference that folks can have. But importantly, you want to be very frequent with your feedback. Not only are you doing it frequently, but you're doing kind of immediately after you observe a behavior. You want to open with positivity, reiterate the reason for the feedback and the coaching, kind of like what Bridget was saying earlier. Hey, this untouched opportunity situation here is problematic because it's going to negatively impact your win rate. That's why we're doing, and like a low win rate is going to make it such that you don't hit your bookings goals. And if you don't hit your bookings goals, you're not going to be able to pay off those student loans, or you're not going to be able to like buy that house, or whatever it is that kind of like personally matters to that rep. Document the issue in question, like we were talking about, untouched opportunity situation, figure out like, hey, what might be driving this, and then propose a solution to that. Again, the best way to deal with these sort of things is in the one-on-one. That's like why you want to have it on the calendar. We recommend using a coaching template there, so you make sure that you're documenting what's happening there and coming back to it on a recurring basis. Hey, we've got this pipeline hygiene problem. We're going to come back in 2 weeks. You're going to be doing these things right here that we put on the calendar. And then literally we're going to look at this metric. Like we're going to hyperlink off to, I don't know, an Atrium report or a Salesforce report and say, this untouched opportunities report right here better be under five, or we're going to be having an uncomfortable conversation. Making sure, and then when folks are not, like when that's not actually sticking, that's the point at which you may progress to a performance improvement plan. The important thing though is that if you're being very consistent in feedback, on performance feedback, you probably shouldn't have to get to a formal performance plan situation. Usually a performance improvement plan is an indicator that like you haven't been being consistent in your feedback enough. And we see this a lot here at Atrium. Like not all of our reps work out, but oftentimes what ends up happening is people see like the writing on the wall way ahead of time before it's time to get to a formal performance plan, because like they've seen the leading indicators of they've seen the leading indicators and they kind of know where they're at as compared to where they should be. And so, we actually have a performance improvement plan template that we can drop here into the chat for folks to be able to reference. But if you're doing a good job of like doing frequent performance management in your one-on-ones, you probably won't be progressing to this. And then lastly, make sure that you're properly evaluating like where kind of performance shortfalls might be coming from. And when you're thinking about who might have to, if you need to offboard somebody from the organization, a great framework there is it a will issue or is it a skill issue? So will would be like a level of activity. Are they willing to put in the effort? Are they able to govern themselves and make sure that they're being focused and they're working on the things that need to be worked on? Or is it a skill issue where, they're struggling with discovery questions or they're struggling with XYZ? Usually skill issues can be fixed. Will issues are a little bit more difficult to fix. So first, when you're looking at things, look for reps who have both will and skill issues, because usually that's like kind of the toughest thing to fix. When you have folks who have will deficits, as indicated by like low activity metrics, that ends up being, obviously it's something that you could seek to address, and you probably should, and front and center the shortfalls there. Oftentimes, it's the biggest problem to solve. Or sorry, a stickier problem to solve is just like that core motivation and willingness to like put in the calories. Skill shortfalls, on the other hand, just means there needs to be more coaching, and you'll be more successful if you do that. So that's all the content that we had to, what we have for today. Again, folks, what I would recommend is like, if this sounds interesting to you and you want to get better at, performance management and sales management, we do have our complimentary half-day virtual boot camp, sales management boot camp, that we sponsor with Richard Harris. Normally it would be $1,000 cost for folks. It's complimentary. Atrium pays for it. All we ask for in exchange is a quick disco conversation with our team. We're going to go ahead and drop a link to that. And then moreover, if you're interested in getting a copy of 5 Secrets of a Sales Coach, which I can't recommend highly enough, and then Crushing Quota by Michelle Vazana, and then a Coffees for Coaches mug here from Atrium. Again, just go ahead and sign up in the link that we're going to drop here. Wonderful. So I think we just barely made it under time. This was fun because it was the first time that we've done this content before. Bridget, did you survive?
Yeah, I'm still here. So
barely.
Thanks. Yeah.
Pete and Bridget, that was fantastic. What a great panel. Thank you so much for joining us today and for your time. And thank you for all the great key takeaways that you provided us. I see in the chat that the audience really liked it. Audience, if you really like this panel, you will love our next panel. It's a fireside chat between Pete and Nick Mehta, the CEO of Gansai. That's going to be amazing. I wouldn't miss it. I won't miss it. I'll be there watching and taking notes because that will be fantastic. So stick around. I'll see you in a little bit. Bye bye. Thank you, Pete and Bridget.